It's about the view. It's like it's become like a medical hospital that displays human misfailure. Like it's like here, let's look at this political oddity. It's like it really is like the left-wing equivalent of a carnival sideshow, except instead of bearded ladies and fat clowns and two-headed cows. Well, let me rephrase that. But The View is a victim of the sunk cost fallacy. How can you now speak the truth when for years you've been telling lie after lie after lie? Now you're carrying this big bag of rocks around you because it's too harmful for their ego to admit that we really were dishonest.
Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't hold back as they delivered a reality check. The View won't forget anytime soon. Let's just say things got real. Fast. Sunny Hostin and her co-hosts looked blindsided as the duo brought the heat with biting wit and razor-sharp sarcasm. Intrigued? You should be. Let's break down one of the most blistering call-outs we've seen on live TV.
Some news, the feral monsters of The View say they've never heard of you-know-who. True, the show that makes mornings hell claim that my name doesn't ring a bell. It's time for...
Our view on The View. Ugh.
Yeah, the witch's coven finally shows me some lovin'. Yesterday on The View, yours truly was the subject of conversation. Apparently the broads have no idea who I am, or so they say. Hit it, Gladys.
They said that Gutfeld talks about you all the time.
Who is he? Well, really, who is he?
I don't watch the show.
He has a show.
I don't watch the
never
show.
heard of him.
Yeah.
I guess he's just obsessed with me.
No. Next, Joy's going to say she's never heard of carbs. Seriously, her denial of knowing me is as believable as her red hair.
Political talk shows often follow a script, predictable, repetitive, and loaded with recycled opinions. If you've tuned into The View, you've likely heard the usual progressive buzzwords all dressed up in dramatic flair. But then Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus stepped in, smashing through that echo chamber with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. And yes, they absolutely brought the fire.
But obsession? I mean, come on, Joy. Where would you even get that idea? Like Joy Behar's face, it's looking worse and worse by the day. More full of crap than Joy Behar after a night of scotch and Taco Bell. Her being named Joy is like me being named ugly. Joy wasn't there on the show. Apparently Mondays are her days off when she feeds in the pasture. It now smells like a humid day inside Joy Behar's moo-moo. The motives stink worse than Joy Behar's jog bra. I mean, assuming she jogs. Oh, wait, there she is. She has a point. Maybe I am obsessed, but some people are obsessed with Bigfoot, and they don't get to see him on TV every afternoon.
Like a series of surgical strikes, they fired off blow after blow, ripping into The View with such force the hosts were left fumbling for a comeback that never came. And the best part? Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't even need to be there in person. It was like watching The View unravel from a distance, minus the usual lecture and virtue signaling.
You know who just stunk up The View. The Bidens joined The View this morning for the entire hour. The audience was caught off guard, but knew something was up when they saw a dozen Secret Service agents and 2 embalmers. There were a few awkward moments, though, when a confused Joe asked if he could bid on the showcase. But was he surprised Kamala lost?
Here's the thing about Greg Gutfeld. He doesn't need a spotlight to make someone look ridiculous. His podcast, it's basically a battleground where liberal cliches go to get dismantled. Figuratively speaking, of course. No polished scripts, no crowd-pandering applause, just raw, unfiltered mayhem. And in one standout episode, armed with razor-sharp humor and finely tuned sarcasm, Greg set his sights on The View. That so-called sanctuary of smug, left-leaning commentary that pretends to be morally superior while clinging to the most absurd talking points.
Sure, all that, and the price of butter. Sunny gets the game ball. If it wasn't for her, if it wasn't for her asking that question, it might have been a closer election. But when oh no, nothing really comes to mind, I was like, cha-ching. Listen, they're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. They also should be, this should have been a reset for everyone who pushed lies and misinformation for the last, they called him Hitler, they call these things, America rejected them. And instead of coming back and saying, we lied, they instead are now doubling down. So let her keep doing it, because if she keeps that up, we're going to keep getting the Senate and probably the House and the White House, because people see right through your lies. So keep doing what you're doing. Game ball to Sonny.
In Gutfeld's universe, going after the View is like tossing raw steak into a cage full of wild animals. You know it's going to be torn to shreds, and the carnage is nothing short of hilarious. Greg's humor isn't just biting, it's precision-targeted satire. He doesn't simply mock the View, he dissects it, exposing every phony, laughable attempt at self-importance. Each time they roll out another overused soundbite, Greg fires back with a zinger, fast, brutal, and impossible to miss. But it's not just for laughs. He's calling out the absurd reality of a media brand that parades around as the moral authority while pushing the idea that any opposing view is invalid. It's a spectacle, really. A media funhouse that should come with a warning label. Step in if you dare, but don't expect to leave with your pride intact. And Greg, wielding sarcasm like a wrecking ball, kicked things off by going straight for their sacred cow. Political correctness. They preach inclusion, unless your views don't match theirs. Greg nailed them with the observation that while they constantly tout their tolerance, their patience for alternative opinions is practically non-existent. Their version of diversity? Watching a Democrat from LA argue with a Democrat from Manhattan. Yeah, that's the level we're working with.
Their brains are small. But who's the dumbest one of all? True, none of them are in Mensa, but who's the most densa? Perhaps it's Sonny who mastered the art of making idiots look smart. Now, the View could ask a mirror who's the dumbest one of all, but there's no way that glass doesn't shatter.
But Greg isn't done yet with his deep dive into the View. No, it's not enough to just call out their progressive ideals while they strut around like they're the moral elite. Greg digs deeper, relentlessly pointing out that the show's tolerance only goes so far, and only for those who share their exact worldview. Step outside their bubble, and you've earned yourself a one-way ticket to the shut up, you're wrong train. Disagree with them? Get ready to be dismissed with a flood of righteous indignation, a never-ending sermon of self-congratulation, and a heaping dose of moral superiority. Here's the kicker. They don't actually want to have a real conversation or hear differing viewpoints. No, they'd rather silence you entirely. If you're not parroting the same tired lines they've been repeating for years, you're not worth their time. This, the art of preaching to the choir, is their specialty, surrounded by a circle of like-minded voices, all patting each other on the back, blissfully unaware that they're all singing the same song.
It's not even that. In the View, you don't need to find Trumpers. You need to fire your race baiters.
Yeah.
You need to fire the two races. You've had people. You had a McCain on there. You've had people on there before, and you ran them off. Mm-hmm. So the racist ones who want to stick to this, Whoopi and Sonny, and was it Bette Midler? What's her name? Yeah, broke-ass Bette Midler. Fire them and bring people in. Maybe you could get McCain to come back. She was a Republican, but every show and every break, she was nearly in tears because she was being attacked.
It's the oldest trick in the book. Pretend to be all-inclusive while keeping the doors locked for anyone who dares to challenge their sacred narrative. It's almost like a cult, except their only deity is their own enlightened opinions. Meanwhile, Greg watches from his perch, delivering a perfect reminder that the View's brand of tolerance is nothing but an empty slogan that crumbles as soon as you step outside their narrow, prescribed lines. And Greg didn't stop there. He dug into their hypocrisy like a hound on a bone, tearing it apart with precision. He shredded how the View loves to act as the moral compass, lecturing the public on how they should think, all while their logic collapses like a poorly built sandcastle. It was like watching a master surgeon dissect a weak argument, with Greg skillfully exposing how the View loves to accuse others of the very behaviors they display daily. They've mastered the art of finger pointing while completely ignoring the mirror of their own glaring contradictions. It's almost impressive how they project their flaws onto others while remaining blissfully unaware of their own constant missteps.
The problem is that you have to go after the racist people. And if be the CEO goes, you know what, I'm not going to allow a woman on my show or man that will go after white America and talk about them like dogs. That doesn't represent our ideals or values for anyone. And get rid of those people. And this will clear up real quick. So do you have to actually look in the mirror and clean up your own backyard and get the racist people out? Because that's who you allowed in. You allowed black racist on TV who could just go all day and say anything about white people. And I guess lo and behold, they forgot that there's a lot of people at home, white people at home during the day that are not watching your show anymore. So just clean it up.
Yeah, Emily.
Greg, never one to let hypocrisy slide, skillfully pulled back the curtain on their double standards, exposing them for everyone to see. No one was going to get away with that on his watch, especially when it was wrapped in the smugness of self-righteousness. A hypocrite's favorite game is, of course, accusing others of doing exactly what they're masters at. And Greg wasn't about to let them off the hook. Then there's Tyrus. If Greg is the intellectual scalpel, Tyrus is the wrecking ball, a raw force of nature with zero interest in niceties. While Greg delivers sarcasm with surgical precision, Tyrus doesn't waste time with subtlety. He demolishes the issue head-on. He's the kind of pundit who doesn't tiptoe around the point or sugarcoat anything. He'll smash your argument with a sledgehammer. And if your feelings get flattened in the process, well, that's just a casualty of war. Tyrus's brutal honesty is what makes his commentary so refreshingly real. He doesn't care about adhering to any narrative or playing by the rules. He's there to tear down the fake facades, and he does it without hesitation or remorse. Tyrus's takedown of The View was like watching a freight train plow through a pile of glass, messy, loud, and utterly impossible to ignore. While Greg weaved layers of sharp sarcasm, Tyrus charged in like a bull in a china shop, going straight for the throat with cold, hard facts. He didn't care that the hosts were out there spewing the usual leftist talking points. He was there to remind them just how far their arguments had drifted from reality.
That's not what I read. The true sign of the apocalypse is someone that dumb has a law degree. Worse, if your name has the word sun in it, there's no excuse for not knowing how an eclipse works. But it's no surprise that Joy is the one who understands science. She's been on the science diet for years. They're turning on me. So that makes Sonny Hostin, who thinks climate change caused the solar eclipse, the dumbest of them all. Because everyone knows the moon caused the eclipse, which is controlled by The View's gravitational pull.
Take, for instance, Tyrus's take on how The View loves to twist the facts. They'll say something that seems right on the surface, but once you dig a little deeper, it's as empty as a hollow Easter bunny. Tyrus called it for what it was: disinformation, wrapped up in a velvet glove. He wasn't about to let them off the hook with their usual spin. He made it crystal clear: you can't keep spreading misinformation and expect people to take you seriously. This wasn't a debate. This was a public service announcement that The View really needed to hear. And then the real magic kicked in. Greg and Tyrus, in their perfect mix of sarcasm and hard-hitting truths, dismantled the hosts, even though they weren't even in the same room. They didn't need to go head-to-head with them directly. The power of their words did all the damage. There's something deeply satisfying about watching the hosts of The View, safe behind their desks, exchange looks like kids who've just been caught raiding the cookie jar, only no one's there to catch them. It's like watching someone nail a joke you don't fully understand, but you know exactly what's going on.
People have to wonder, where does Sonny Hostin get her opinions?
Yeah.
Like you said, and it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say on The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. But the problem with her is that she went full racist. She injected skin color into a fairly generic behavior seen in all spouses, regardless of skin color. People marry, they listen to each other, they have something in common with them, they share their political views. She just didn't want to upset her husband by saying her husband makes her do everything, and then she'd have to accuse him of being a racist. because if he told her that this is what white women do, then he's a racist. You see?
You're left speechless. Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus weren't just cracking jokes at The View, they were tearing apart the glaring contradictions in every single talking point the show had ever pushed. It wasn't about picking apart the individual hosts. It was about exposing the collective arrogance of the entire show. And Greg and Tyrus were the perfect pair to do it. Greg grabbed the mic to call out the hypocrisy. He threw jabs at their inability to see beyond their narrow worldview, poking fun at the rehearsed outrage that drives so much of The View's content. It's like watching a dog chase its tail, except this time, the dog thinks it's solving global issues by barking at clouds. Greg's commentary was the perfect antidote to their sanctimonious air. If they wanted to preach tolerance, Greg reminded them, maybe they should start by accepting views that don't align with their pre-made agenda. Until then, all that talk about tolerance was nothing more than empty words. And then there's Tyrus. Oh, Tyrus. While Greg painted the scene with sharp humor, Tyrus came in like a wrecking ball, delivering a 1-2 punch of logic and unapologetic truth.
Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe.
Tyrus pointed out that while The View loves to push a narrative of victimhood and liberal superiority, they never seem to look in the mirror at their own hypocrisy. It's all about the right victim and the right cause. You're allowed to feel oppressed as long as you're in the right political camp. It's a tired, predictable routine, and Tyrus wasn't having any of it. He reminded The View that while they love to play the victim card, they almost never acknowledge the systemic issues within their own ideology. The beauty of it all, The View's attempt to position themselves on some moral high ground was obliterated by Greg and Tyrus's relentless breakdown of every flaw and contradiction. It was like they were holding up a mirror, and what The View saw staring back wasn't pretty. In their typical self-righteous fashion, the hosts looked like deer caught in headlights. You could almost feel the deafening silence in the air as Greg and Tyrus cut through their echo chamber with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. In a world where politics often feels like a never-ending game of high-stakes poker, Greg and Tyrus stepped into the ring and called The View's bluff.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
The View hosts found themselves trapped in their own web of contradictions, unable to defend their positions. The brilliance of it all, it wasn't even a confrontation. There were no raised voices, no awkward silences, no need for point-by-point rebuttals. Greg and Tyrus didn't even have to be there in person. Everything they said from the comfort of their podcast was enough to send The View into a spiral of confusion and self-doubt. The backlash? Well, that was to be expected. After all, Greg and Tyrus are like a comedic hurricane. You can feel it coming, you can hear the wind howling, and then bam! You're standing amidst the ruins of your carefully constructed liberal talking points, wondering how it all fell apart. What's so great about these two is that they don't just settle for the low-hanging fruit. They go straight for the jugular, reminding The View and its viewers that the emperor has no clothes. In the end, The View didn't just lose the argument. They lost all semblance of the moral superiority they love to flaunt. Greg and Tyrus didn't just expose their contradictions, they laid bare the entire facade. And the best part, they did it all without stepping foot into the lion's den. The View might have thought they were untouchable, but Greg and Tyrus just proved that even the largest media empires have their flaws, especially when they're too busy patting themselves on the back. So to The View we say, you've been warned. The next time Greg and Tyrus come knocking, don't be surprised if the wrecking ball comes back for round 2.